In this lesson, we are going to implement authentication. What we're going to do is to create sign-in button. When user click on it, we create sign-in form, and by entering correct email and password and clicking on sign in with credential, we redirect user to the home page and show the username on header menu. Also, user should be able to sign out from their account, and that's it. In the comment section, find implement authentication and use this code throughout this lesson. Let's get to code. Here is the plan to implement authentication. Let's start by installing NextAuth. Go to auth.js.dev, click on Get Started, select Next, and follow the instruction here. Let's do this step by step. We're going to use pnpm. So copy this command to install NextAuth @beta. Open a new terminal and install this package. Next step is set up an environment. We need to create auth secret using this command. Copy this, paste it here, then copy this line, open env.local, paste it here. It's the auth secret. We use this to encrypt tokens. Next step is creating auth.ts in the root folder. Copy this, go to the empty space in Explorer, new file, auth.ts. Paste the code here. Let's go for next one. Adding a route handler under this path. Create API auth nextauth/route.ts. I just copy this entirely until API. Then go to app folder, new file, paste it right here. It create API auth nextauth folder for us. And then copy this, paste them right here. This. Next step is adding middleware. Copy this, create middleware in empty space, new file, set file name to middleware.ts and paste the code right here. Great, it's done. The next step is setting authentication method. Because I'm going to use email and password authentication, the credential authentication, I need to create user table. So we need to go to the database on the sidebar of auth.js website and select the result ORM. Follow the instruction here, copy the first line. We already installed the result ORM, so we just need to install the result adapter. Copy this in a new terminal. No need to install the result ORM, just install @auth/the result adapter. There is no need to set environment variable. And scroll down to find the schema part. Here is the PostgreSQL. Copy the user, account, session, and verification code, only this part. And then go to schema.ts, write before product, paste the code here, and set the section to users. Replace ID with UUID. We're not going to use text. To adjust it with other primary key in other tables. Do the same in the user ID in account table. Replace it with UUID. Import adapter account type from nextauth/adapter. Scroll down. Import primary key from the result ORM/pgcore/primary keys. Then here I have another user ID in session table. Replace it with UUID. And that's it about modifying a schema of the result ORM to create user table, account table, session table, and verification token. By having these tables, we can implement all type of authentication system like Google, GitHub, Magic Link, and email and password, the credential login. Next step is adding credential provider. First of all, to encrypt user password, we need to install bcrypt package. pnpm add bcrypt tsh. I'm going to use this package because it can be run as edge function on Vercel. Go to auth.ts and replace this code with this one. Import the result adapter, import compare sync from bcrypt tsh, equal from the result ORM, import type nextauth config from nextauth, the nextauth itself, and credential provider from nextauth. Then import DB from the result to access to database and users from DB schema. Export const config. Here is the nextauth configuration. The first object in the config is pages. Here I have 2 pages. For sign in, user should be redirected to sign in page, and for error, user will be redirected to sign in page again. We need to implement these pages later in this lesson. The next setting is session. I'm setting the strategy to JWT, so I'm not gonna save the session in database because it's slow. I'm going to make it in JWT in the HTTP only cookie and set the max age to 30 days. You can change it based on your requirement. Next step is very important. It's the adapter, the database adapter. So all data will be saved using this adapter. I'm using the result adapter and pass a DB instance as parameter to the result adapter. After this, it's time to set the provider. It's an array. In this lesson, we're going to implement credential provider. For next lesson, we implement Google, Magic Link, and other providers too. Credential provider is a function from nextauth which accepts an object as parameter. In this object, we set the credential field. It has email and password of type email and password. Next setting for credential provider is authorize function. When user enter email and password, this function handle the submission. If there is no credential, return null. Otherwise, find the user with the email passed through authorize function. I mean the email in the sign-in form. If user exists and user has password, so we need to add password. Let's add it. Go to a schema, find user, and right after email, add 2 new fields, role. By default, it's user and password type text. Go back to auth.ts, there is no error. So if user exists and we have password, use compare sync to compare the encrypted password with the password in the sign-in form through credential parameter. If its match is true, return user information, otherwise return null. It means invalid email or password. Let's go for the next setting for nextauth config. It's callback. Here I'm defining session callback. It's an async function that accepts session user trigger and token. In this function, I get the token.sub. It's the ID of user and put it in the session.user.id. If the trigger is update the session based on the username. We use this one when we're going to update user profile and then return the session. This config should satisfy nextauth config, and at the end, I destructure nextauth function by config parameter to this object. What I need to have is handler auth sign in and sign out from this function. We use this in the route.ts right here. The structure get and post from handler object in the auth.ts. Great. Let's go for next step. After creating auth.ts, it's time to go for middleware. We already created middleware. Just add config to the middleware. So we don't want to check static images and assets in the middleware to make a website faster. Next step is creating types for user role. Go to types folder, new file, set file name to next-auth.d.ts. Here is the code of it. Import default session. Here we're gonna add role to the user of session interface in nextauth module. Next step is editing index.ts in constant folder and adding default values for email and password. Go to index in constant, set default value for email password. For development purposes, you can set it to whatever you like to make your coding faster. After this, it's time to create two sample users. Open sample data right before product, define users array, import hash sync from bcrypt.sh, and create two users. First one is John admin _ example 1 to 6. We encrypt this, and role is admin. The next user role is user. Next one is installing ShadCN packages, because we're gonna go for the UI part to create sign-in page. Open a new terminal and pnpm.dlx ShadCN UI at some latest, add label, input, and drop-down menu. After installing this, we need to install Zod validator. We're gonna validate the user information using Zod. Good. pnpm add Zod, and then in the live folder create validator.ts. Go to live folder, new file, validator.ts. Here is the code. Import start as z from Zod and define sign-in form schema. It's an object that contains two fields, email and password of type string. The minimum length should be 3 characters. I can use email after it to make the validation better. Next step is in the user actions. We need to define sign in with credential function. Let's go for it. Go to live action, new file, user action.ts. Here is the source code. It's a server-side only code. Use server, import is redirect error from next, and sign in and sign out from auth.ts. Also import sign-in form schema from validator. The first function that I'm going to define in user action is sign in with credential. It accepts two parameters, previous state and form data. So as you see, we're going to use this in the next action form scenario. Create a try-catch block, parse input data in the form data using sign-in form schema.parse from Zod. If there is an error, we will be redirected to this part. Otherwise, we call sign-in function from auth.ts. Using next auth, we sign in user with this information. User has email and password. If everything is okay, sign in successfully. Otherwise, if is redirect error through error, otherwise return invalid email or password. By using this condition, we get rid of redirect error, because in async function, we cannot call redirect function. The other function is export const sign out. Simply call sign out function. Save the code. Let's go for next step. It's creating sign in page. Go to app and create a root group for auth. App, new folder, in parentheses, auth. Inside that, create a new folder for sign in, and inside auth, create new file, layout.tsx. Inside sign in, create new file, page.tsx, and we are ready to create a layout for sign in page. It's super simple. Just import React, create layout, constant, and export default. Layout is a function that accepts children of type React node, and inside that I return a div set flex center, full height and full width, and return children. Inside sign-in folder, create a new file, set file name to credential sign-in form. Here is the code for credential sign-in form. It's a client-side component, use client, and export default function credential sign-in form. It's the main component that I'm going to export and use it in the page.tsx in the sign-in page. What we're gonna do here is to use form state hook, pass sign in with credential function. It's the action in the server side, and pass the default value for this form state. Message by default is empty and success by default is false. Get the result in data and action. Then use search params hook to access to the search params. We have callback URL in the query string, put it in callback URL constant. Then define sign in button. It's a function, React functional component. Inside that, I get access to the pending state of use form status and return a button. If pending is true, show submitting, otherwise show signing with credential. It's disabled if pending is true. Here is the main component. Return a form, set action to the action from here. So when user click here, sign in with credential in the server side will be called, and all input boxes here, the values will be passed to that action. Inside this form, create hidden input box and pass the callback URL to this action. Then create the first input box, its email. So what I'm doing here is to create a space between email and password using a wrapper dev set class name to a space vertically 6. In the first dev, create label. I'm using Chatcn UI to create a label and set input box default value to the sign-in default value inside the constant. Next one is password, and then render sign-in button. If data exists and it's not success, show the error message using text deconstructive, the red color. If data does not exist at all, show unknown error occurred and reload the page, and create the last dev. If user don't have an account, link user to the sign up page. We implement this page later. Save the code and go to page.tsx in the sign in folder. Here is the code for it. Define metadata to set the title of the page. Export default async function sign in. It's a server component, the sign in page. Here we access to the callback URL through search parameters and call auth function. Get the result of auth. Here it's coming from auth.ts. If the session exists, it means that user already logged in, so there is no need to show the sign-in page. What I do here is to redirect user to the callback URL, wherever user was before login. Then return a dev, make it full width, and create a card. Card header. In the card header, display the logo of the brand. Set card title to sign in. Card description, select a method to sign in, and in the card content, render credential sign-in form. We already created this component here. Great. Last part to test the result is in the seed.ts. Go to seed.ts. Right before creating products, create users using await_db insert schema.users value sample data.users and return the results to the res users. So I need to log it back right here, and don't forget to remove previous accounts and users from the database. Next step is in index.tsx in headers folder, go to components shared header index.tsx and find the button for sign in, replace the href with /API/auth/sign-in. Save the code, go to homepage and click on sign in. Awesome. We successfully implemented sign-in page. Let's enter an email like test@gmail.com123 and click on sign in with credential, submitting, and it's invalid email or password. Awesome. So we implemented the wrong scenario for the correct email and password. First of all, we need to seed data. Let's go to the terminal. Before seeding data, we need to create user, account, and other tables on the Postgres database. To do that, run this code. If you remember from lesson 6, setup Drizzle, the command is npx drizzle-kit push. Open the terminal and run npx drizzle-kit push to create tables on the server. Okay? Changes applied. So we are ready to seed data. To run seed.ts in the terminal, run this command npx tsx:/db/seed and press enter. Press Y to install tsx, and there we are. We have new user in the database. Okay, let's test email and password of admin. Enter correct email and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and click on sign in. Awesome. We get redirected to the home page, but in the header, we don't have the username. Let's fix this issue in the header. First of all, create user button component in header folder of shared folder. Go to component shared header, new file, user button. Here is the code for user button. We export default async function user button. It's a server components. Then we get the headers from next headers. Then we call auth and get the session. If session does not exist, simply render sign in button with link to /API/auth/sign-in. Otherwise, I'm going to render drop-down menu. Let's import it like this from components UI drop-down menu. No need to have header here. In the drop-down menu, I have drop-down trigger. It's a button. The caption of this button is username. It comes from session.user.name. When user click on it, the drop-down content will be shown. In drop-down content, I'm going to show a label first. It's the username and user email. Then show a drop-down menu item. It's a form that contains sign out button. When user click on it, sign out will be called. It's an action that comes from here. Let's make it with small s. It's sign out with capital S. Here I call sign out with small s from auth.ts. Great. Let's go for next step and use user button. To use user button, create a new file, set file name to menu.tsx. So I'm going to create menu component inside header. Here is the code of menu component. It's a React component that returns a div. In this div, I create a nav, and in the nav, I have a cart button and user button. User button is coming from this newly created component. Good. Let's come back to index.tsx and find this div. I mean the header menu div. Remove it and replace it with menu and import it from /menu. At the end, get rid of unnecessary import like this. Before committing your changes, always run npm run build to make sure there is no error in your code. I just run it, and as you see, it successfully built the project. Let's check the result. Awesome. Here I have cart and John. John is the username. When I click on it, I have this drop-down menu, the name of user, email of user, and sign out button. Let's test sign out. Click on it. Aha, great. I have sign in button now. If I click on it, I get redirected to sign in page, sign in with credential. Awesome. I get back to the home page. Great. In this lesson, we successfully implemented authentication using credential provider by entering email and password and checking them in the PostgreSQL database. In the next lesson, we go for other parts of this fully functional e-commerce website. Until that lesson, bye-bye.